In the teachings of the Great Perfection, we hear often and we read that there is nothing to accept, nothing to reject, nothing to be accomplished, nothing to abandon, nothing to attain, nothing to get. So in this sense, from the perspective of someone who is really deeply interested and motivated to discover their own nature, to discover who they really are, the real nature of being, is there something to do? So today I want to talk about the contemplative life from the perspective of the Dzogchen, the Great Perfection tradition, from my own experience. And I want to frame it in the context of letting go. So, when the teachings say that there is nothing to attain, nothing to get, nothing to reject, nothing to accept, the nature of reality is the great perfection, the luminous great expanse, self-complete, self-perfected, spontaneously present. However, we have to acknowledge that this is not the experience that most people have. And why is that? Well, in order to understand what means contemplation, what means the contemplative life, the contemplative path, this essential path of the Great Perfection, we need to distinguish between ordinary mind and the nature of the mind. Ordinary mind, that which appears to be ourselves, that which we normally say, myself, my mind, that's what I mean by ordinary mind. That ordinary mind, that sense of self that arises, it seems to be very concrete, it seems to be very real. There is me, there's a world, and this experience is exactly the reason why the experience itself does not match the reality of what is described in the Great Perfection, what is described as what the nature of reality is. And while we have this disconnection between our real experience and how things really are, while this is disconnected, right? So just to have some kind of ideas about it, to have some kind of intellectual ideas, to have studied philosophy, to have reflected, to have, confidence intellectually, and that it is like this. This is not enough. This is not enough because it does not correspond to experience. It is just an idea, it is just fantasy, actually. You see, spiritual fantasy is just like any other fantasy. So the contemplative life is about coming down from the intellectual ideas into the actual experience. And that experience has to begin by clearly distinguishing, not intellectually, but experientially, clearly distinguishing between what is the difference between this ordinary mind, this dualistic subject-object experience where everything feels very solid, very concrete, and the natural state of being. the natural state of being becomes the way through which this dualistic fixation starts to melt away, it starts to fragment, it starts to break apart. And as this dualistic fixation starts to break apart, as it starts to dissolve, there's this experience that seems like the true nature of reality starts to emerge. So even though, in truth, there is nothing to attain, there is nothing to achieve, everything is self-perfected. The nature of reality is self-perfected. Until that is actually experienced, and I use the word experienced very loosely here, because in reality, at that point, we cannot say experience, because experience means that there is someone experiencing something. And that's not the case. But there's no other way to really speak much better, so I will just use that term, to experience. Because what I'm trying to emphasize is that we need to distinguish between intellectual idea and actual experience. Because I feel that many times this is an obstacle, this is a problem. Especially these days, I notice a little bit this happens. There's a lot of, exposure for people that are interested in this type of, teachings, whether it's Dzogchen or other forms of non-duality, or Buddhism, that there's this repeating of these ideas. Everything is the great perfection, pure awareness, and all these things. But it's all very intellectual. It's almost like we just get another belief. We believe that everything is, great perfection, or everything is non-dual, something like this. But that's not enough. We need to distinguish between experience and intellectual idea. To start by understanding intellectually, of course, it's important, but it's really just the beginning. I wouldn't even say it's the beginning, it's even before the beginning. So once we start to understand, we have to look at what is the mind, what is this subject, and by looking at what is this subject, we will understand that there's nothing there to be found. And within that, there is a natural clarity, there is a natural presence, which does not belong to you. It doesn't belong to anyone. Normally, it's very common to use expressions like, your real nature is, the great perfection, or your real nature is the absolute, or whatever it is. But that as well, that is only an expression. It's actually a very limited expression that if we don't clarify it, it can lead to misunderstanding. Because it's not your nature, Because it doesn't belong to you. Because this self is illusory, right? So how can it belong to you? How can it be my nature? From a relative dualistic perspective, we can say something is mine. I can say this is my shirt, But when you say, my real nature is, we need to pay really attention. How are we looking at it? Are we looking at it like it's my real nature. It's my real being. Because that's a misunderstanding that will lead you astray, for sure. Because it's not reality. The real nature does not belong to anyone. It's not your real nature. To say your real nature is just a form of expression. It's a form of expression to point to the fact that that which we think we are is illusory. So we say our real nature in that sense. But when you glimpse that nature, there is no one that is glimpsing that nature. And that it's clear that this nature is just what is. It is just what is. It has no owner. It's not mine, yours, anybody's. And that's the same meaning as pure awareness, intrinsic awareness, primordial wisdom, non-dual awareness. There's many words that can be used for it. But it doesn't really matter the words. What matters is the actual recognition, the actual experience. So the contemplative life is not necessarily, I mean, it can be as well, but it's not necessarily just about, going somewhere remote. Well, I mean, but it's not about that. It can be, sure, but if a person has the inclination for that, it can be, but it's not necessarily like that. It is about turning within. Turning within, what does it mean, turning within? Turning within means to recognize this clear, lucid presence. And when I say turning within, that's also not correct, because it's not really turning within. Because this lucid, present, clear, open knowingness, it's not within. It's not within, it's not inside, it's not outside. It just is. The reason why I say turn within is because due to habit, due to a very strong conditioning, the mind is naturally turned outward all the time. The mind is always focused on outer things, whether it's on, what is appearing to the vision, to the eyes, looking here, looking there, or sounds, listening to this, listening to that, or thoughts. Thoughts is a way of looking out also, not in a sensory perspective, but is looking out because why? Because there's an observer, there's a subject that is fixating, that is looking at the thought. So from the perspective of this subject, from the perspective of this observer, the thought is something external, right? So the mind has this habit, ordinary mind, has this habit of always turning outside, always grasping outside, always grasping this, that, this, sense perceptions, feelings, emotions, thoughts, it's always turned out. It's like a camera, always focused on objects. And in order to sort of come to here, I say turn within. But it's not really turning within, it's just stopping to focusing on outer things, actually. But in the beginning, that is very difficult. If you try to stop focusing on outer things, you'll find it very hard. But if you relax a little bit and just notice this, this turning within, what looks like turning within. And there's this presence, clear, lucid, open. And this is the beginning of the contemplative life. This is the beginning of understanding what contemplation means. This is the beginning of returning to the natural state of being. And when I refer here to the natural state, I'm really not speaking yet about sort of really the ground of reality. I'm speaking about this uncontrived way of allowing the presence to just flow, which becomes itself the way in which this dualistic fixation starts to break apart. There is an aspect of letting go as well in this. Not letting go in the sense of, okay, you know, I abandoned this or something like this, but a letting go in the sense of not having to fixate all the time on all of this moving show. Because it is like a moving show, you see. It's like a cinema show. There's all these visual stimuli. There's the sounds, sensations, thoughts, feelings, and always looking at this show all the time. Always looking at this show all the time. So it is letting go of that. Not letting go in the sense of turning our back to whatever is appearing, whatever is arising in our life or in the experience of the moment, not in the sense of turning our back, but in the sense of, I don't need to go after it. I can just stay here. It's like, you know, I'm sitting here. Probably you can't see, but this is a bit, it's like a slope going down over there. Let's say if there's a ball, if there would be a ball rolling down, somebody loses a ball and the ball will be rolling down. Probably like a reflex would be to jump up and try to get the ball, you know. Or I can just see the ball rolling down and just sit here. And I'm not turning my back on it. It's perfectly clear that the ball is rolling down. I just don't need to go and do anything about it. I don't need to fixate on it. And from that perspective, this is a letting go. But this now moves into the field of like integration of how we move in life, how we work and walk and talk and do all these things in life in this contemplative state. And that's probably a topic for another video. But in the beginning, it's just important to recognize these things that I was talking about, this distinction between ordinary mind, which always is fixating outside. And outside can mean also thoughts, because thoughts are, as I said before, from the perspective of the subject, thoughts are something else, other. To notice this difference and to turn within as a counter to that a little bit and touch base with this just clarity, presence, this lucid, clear, open. Just notice that. Withdraw a little bit within, not completely like focusing inside yourself, but like just withdraw a little bit within and notice. Clear, lucid, open, present. Clear, lucid, open, present. at that moment, there's nobody home. Or at least if there is something very faint, something very ghost-like. It does not have the same solid shape and form that it normally has. If you pay attention, you'll notice that when mind is fully in this subject-object dualistic fixation mode, the stronger the mind is holding at an object, the stronger this sense of self is. Because they're interdependent. The stronger I'm fixating on thoughts, feelings, emotions, objects, the stronger this sense of me seems to be. But when we step back a little bit into presence, then there's this openness. And now all of a sudden, where is it? Where is it?